War. War never changes. In the era dominated by digital advancements, anticipation for the first true cyber war has gripped our collective consciousness. Yet when it comes to Russia's notorious employment of cyber warfare, a perplexing absence of a clear cyber front in Ukraine emerges from the media narrative. No detonation of cyber bombs, so to speak, has been witnessed. Have we been deceived or oversold on the significance of cyber warfare? Or have we underestimated the complexities and limitations of this domain? Does it all come down to tanks, shells, and manpower? NATO representatives noted that on February 24th alone, Russia successfully deployed more destructive malware than the rest of the world's cyber powers combined typically use in a given year. However, Russia has failed to achieve any objectives on a significant scale. This begs the question, why? Why has Russia stumbled in a domain long perceived as one of its strongest? What exactly is Russia's track record in utilizing cyber warfare, which has earned it such notoriety? And has Elon Musk helped or made things worse? Tellingly, Putin himself is reported to prefer using traditional methods of communication, such as face-to-face meetings and written documents, to minimize the risk of electronic surveillance. He avoids using smartphones or other internet connection devices, which could potentially be targeted by hackers. That makes sense when you yourself are running the largest hacking ring in the world. His level of paranoia is direct evidence of his understanding of how vulnerable these systems are. While attributing direct involvement to the Russian government is often challenging to substantiate, certain operations raise suspicions due to their circumstantial evidence and timing. In 2007, the Estonian government made the decision to relocate the bronze soldier from its prominent position in the center of Tallinn to a military cemetery situated on the city's outskirts. For the Russians of Estonia, this statue represented their nation's triumph over the Wehrmacht in the Second World War, while for the Estonians it was a constant reminder of their subjugation to Soviet rule. As a result, there was unrest in Estonia and a series of cyber attacks. Online banking was made inaccessible, government employees were suddenly unable to communicate, and media outlets could not distribute the news. The attacks reportedly came from Russian IP addresses. This is the first time in history one country is said to have orchestrated a cyber attack on another. While the first European war of the 21st century was also the first recorded instance when a cyber attack was launched in tandem with a conventional invasion. In August 2008, following a period of worsening relations between Russia and Georgia, South Ossetian forces started shelling Georgian villages. Then Russia falsely accused Georgia of committing aggression against South Ossetia, and it launched a full-scale land, air, and sea invasion under the pretense of peace enforcement. In the meantime, and leading up to the invasion, many Georgian government servers and internet service providers were attacked and brought down, hindering communications and the dissemination of crucial information. The websites of the Georgian president was rendered inoperable for 24 hours by a series of DDoS attacks, and images likening him to Adolf Hitler were uploaded in an effort to reduce people's trust in the government. Beginning in mid-January 2009, Kyrgyzstan's two main internet service providers came under a large-scale DDoS attack, shutting down websites and email within the country, effectively taking the nation offline. The way it was done was quite similar to what happened in Georgia just a year prior. The attacks came at a time when the country's president was being pressured by both domestic actors and Russia to close a US airbase in Kyrgyzstan. He caved to the pressure. Of course, Russia has been alleged of trying to fry the biggest fish of all, garnering significant global attention. During the 2016, 2018, and 2020 elections, Russian hackers targeted various institutions, including the White House. These attacks involved data breaches, disinformation campaigns, and the release of hacked emails, creating widespread concern over the integrity of democratic processes within the United States. It may never be clear how much Russia's misinformation campaign and its various hacks contributed to making America great, but it's almost certainly more than 0%. One thing is certain. The Russians have been hacking Uncle Sam ever since the internet became a public tool. Moonlight Maze was an investigation launched in 1999 into a Russian cyber attack against NASA, the Pentagon, the US military, and its contractors. The investigators claimed that if all the information stolen was printed out and stacked, it would be 3 times the height of the Washington Monument, which is 169 meters tall. The hackers found success since software manufacturers and maintainers were not vigilant about making sure there were no flaws in their systems. They would leave known vulnerabilities unpatched for long periods of time. This was because prior to Moonlight Maze, few were aware of the damage that could be done through cyber attacks, since the internet was still relatively new. Moonlight Maze represents one of the first widely known cyber espionage campaigns in world history. Furthermore, Russia has been accused of activities in France, Germany, Poland, Romania, South Korea, United Kingdom, Venezuela, and of course, Ukraine. The growing concerns over online privacy and security call for a reliable solution that can protect your digital life. That's where Atlas VPN comes in. With Atlas VPN, your Google searches remain private, and your online activities are shielded from prying eyes. Say goodbye to being tracked and enjoy browsing with real and organic results. Not only does Atlas VPN keep your information secure, but it also blocks malicious links, ads, and trackers, alerting you when someone tries to steal your data. Let me share a secret. I have a Steam account registered in the Philippines. Thanks to Atlas VPN, I can access their store from anywhere and enjoy games at half the price. Don't miss out on the summer deal. Get Atlas VPN Premium for just $183 per month, with 3 months extra and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your privacy and enjoy the benefits of Atlas VPN at an incredible price. Take control of your digital life, secure your online presence, and explore the internet with a peace of mind. Click the link, unlock a world of possibilities, and let Atlas VPN be your shield in the realm of online security. Currently, there exists a significant challenge in accurately assessing the impact of the cyber war in Ukraine. The Ukrainian government, driven by a strategic imperative, aims to present a relatively positive image of the war to ensure continued support from Western partners and maintain the morale of its people. Consequently, Kyiv has been hesitant to divulge information on casualties and combat losses, and this reluctance is likely even stronger when it comes to cyber incidents. At times, Ukrainian officials have made assertions of cyber triumph that seem implausible. Additionally, Western tech companies, influenced by market incentives, tend to depict their cybersecurity assistance to Ukraine as highly successful and strategically important. Regardless of the success of Russia's digital onslaught, there most definitely was an attempt. NATO representatives have mentioned that on February 24th, Russia successfully deployed more destructive malware than the rest of the world's cyber powers combined typically use in a given year. Similar to previous campaigns, the cyber attack began prior to the kinetic invasion, possibly as early as 2019. From its incident response work, Mandiat observed more destructive cyber attacks in Ukraine during the first 4 months of 2022 than in the previous 8 years, with attacks peaking around the start of the invasion. Russia had increased targeting of users in Ukraine by 250% compared to 2020, and the targeting of users in NATO countries increased over 300% in the same period, according to Google data. Once again, the purpose of these initial attacks was likely to shake people's trust, creating a feeling that the government wasn't in control of the situation. But one of Moscow's primary military objectives is to suppress and overpower Ukrainian combat capabilities. At the onset of the war, Ukraine relied heavily on military equipment from the Soviet era, which likely had limited or no connectivity to digital networks. As the conflict unfolded, Ukraine obtained significant amount of modern weaponry and supplies. The US government has long expressed concerns that American military equipment could be vulnerable to cyber attacks. But so far, there is a striking absence of credible claims suggesting that Russia has successfully conducted any cyber attacks against Ukrainian military systems. Despite this being possibly the largest cyber operation in history, the main goal of the Russian hackers seems to have been to create a feeling of unease for the Ukrainian people, a play with a short-term goal of taking control of the country within just a couple of weeks. Why would Ukrainians trust their government to defend themselves if the government couldn't even maintain a stable internet connection? That was the idea at least, but to everyone's surprise, the Zerg Russia on Kiev faltered in the same way that its cyber offensive did. Russia's most significant success was the disruption of the Viasat KSAT satellite. It provides bidirectional broadband internet access services across Europe and a small area of the Middle East. The hack occurred 1 hour prior to Russian troops crossing the border. This disrupted internet services for several thousand customers located in Ukraine and tens of thousands of other fixed broadband customers across Europe. However, the broader military implications of this event are quite murky, as it is not clear if it had any effect on Ukraine's military performance or its ability to communicate. More damage was likely done when Russian troops attacked over 4,000 mobile base stations, kilometers of fiber optic cable and radio broadcast towers, hindering the sharing and receiving of information by local residents, and preventing questioning of Russia's actions by its own soldiers due to media blackout. As Russia physically occupied cities, it also took control of the digital ecosystem by rerouting internet traffic from Ukrainian networks to Russian ones, and pressuring Ukrainian internet service providers to join Russian networks, under the threat of losing the communications equipment. It is worth mentioning that multiple Ukrainian ground commanders who took part in the initial defense of Kiev have said that Russia completely jammed the Ukrainian communications and satellite networks during the war's opening days and weeks. So it is possible that the Ukrainian government has not fully disclosed just how handicapped its military was during the initial weeks. But Russia also faced formidable opposition from top cyber experts and the collective strength of the global cyber community. Defending against digital threats requires addressing multiple physical and digital vulnerabilities, from the information layer to the backbone of internet infrastructure, which are nowadays mostly beyond the control of states. Companies like Meta own extensive subsea cables, while Starlink operates a large constellation of LEO satellites. This consolidation of communications infrastructure has further concentrated control in the hands of a few companies. And so countering Russia's multi-level cyber and information warfare effectively requires these companies to play an active part in the warfare, as Ukraine urgently needed a more resilient and operational internet infrastructure to counter the Russian offensive. In comes Starlink with its satellite internet constellation system developed by SpaceX, the aerospace company founded by Elon Musk. It aims to provide global broadband coverage by deploying thousands of small satellites in low Earth orbits. These satellites work together to form a network that can deliver high-speed internet connectivity to even the most remote and underserved areas on Earth, and that can include places that have been reduced to rubble due to conflict. The Starlink system operates by transmitting data signals between the satellites in space and user terminals installed on the ground. These user terminals, also known as ground stations, communicate with the satellites to establish an internet connection. After a tweet on February 26, 2022, Starlink provided 500 ground terminals to Ukraine, and within just 5 days, 25 of these terminals were already transmitting data, playing a crucial role in ensuring military and civilian communications. Notably resilient against electronic jamming attacks, Starlink's reinforcement of Ukraine's internet infrastructure has been vital for essential battlefield communications. Ukraine's cybersecurity officials noted Starlink to be the most useful form of digital assistance that Ukraine received by enabling the control of Ukrainian drones. helping besieged Ukrainian troops in Mariupol stay in touch with their commanders, and facilitating Zelensky's communication with world leaders and the global public. It is important to note that Starlink, while not a primary source of internet connectivity for Ukraine, plays a limited role in the country's overall internet infrastructure. Ukrainian terrestrial telecommunications networks, which offer higher bandwidth, have proven to be fairly resilient during the war. Users of Starlink are advised to use it sparingly due to the risk of discovery and targeting by Russian forces. As of early May, Ukraine's digital minister reported that approximately 150,000 Ukrainians, which is less than 1% of the population, utilize Starlink on a daily basis. However, these users may hold greater significance in the context of Ukraine's war efforts. Anecdotal evidence suggests that frontline Ukrainian forces rely on Starlink. They consider it their most vital channel for command and control, and they have experienced severe communication disruptions on the battlefield during its outages. Microsoft detected the Foxblade malware attack the day before Russia made its incursion. Cisco Talos also worked closely with Ukraine to address various malware data wiping incidents, providing protections for customers across the country. According to Talos, Russia has performed perhaps the largest series of discrete attacks ever conducted, and possibly more than Moscow had ever carried out against all targets in its entire history. Both Microsoft and AWS were pivotal in securing Ukraine's public sector infrastructure by facilitating the transfer of its data from physical data centers to the cloud within 10 weeks of invasion. Microsoft provided $107 million of technology services to facilitate this transition. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, highlighted the contribution of AWS in migrating key public registers and records to the cloud as one of the biggest contributions to Ukrainian victory. The need for this migration was also demonstrated when Russia damaged a Ukrainian government data center with a cruise missile attack. Since backups were available, no data had been lost. Assessing the exact impact of all these efforts is challenging, but their vast scale cannot be overlooked. One thing is sure, it is rare for so many prominent cybersecurity entities to unite in safeguarding a specific set of victims against a defined group of adversaries. Besides companies, the Ukrainian government has called upon hackers and cybersecurity experts to join the cause, emphasizing the need to protect critical infrastructure and carry out cyber-spying missions against Russian troops, creating the IT Army of Ukraine. These volunteers were divided into offensive and defensive units, with the offensive units conducting digital espionage, and the defensive units safeguarding vital systems such as power plants and water facilities. They targeted Russian and Belarusian websites, including the Moscow Stock Exchange and Sberbank, rendering them inaccessible. Russian power grids, railways, and technologies were also on their radar, defacing websites, disrupting services, and stealing sensitive data. Collaborating with Anonymous, the IT Army caused a traffic jam in Moscow by attacking Yandex taxi systems. They also claimed to have hacked the website of the Wagner Group, exposing personal data and displaying photos of deceased soldiers. The IT Army is estimated to number around 215,000, an anonymous group predominantly made up of volunteers. Furthermore, ethical hacking used to be illegal in Ukraine, with penalties for those who discovered bugs in state computers. However, in early February 2022, as cyber attacks intensified, the Ukrainian government decided to decriminalize bug bounties, allowing for better detection of security weaknesses. It would be wise, however, to not conflate the symbolic actions of hacktivists with actual strategic effect. While the coming together of thousands of people in their shared goal of protecting Ukraine is noble, many would argue that strategically it had very little effect, especially with regards to the military or Putin's plans. The most difficult problem with an army of thousands of civilian volunteers is coordination, which requires a lot of advanced preparation. In this sense, Ukraine's IT army is no different from Russia's. While Microsoft has made it clear that its involvement in Ukraine is solely defensive, Due to its commitment under the Cybersecurity Tech Accord, commercial tech companies may face legal complexities. They could potentially be considered participants in the conflict and become legitimate targets. This is relevant as the line between consumer and military technology blurs, with militaries relying on consumer tech for military purposes. This is not just the case for DJI drones, but also what Microsoft offers to back up and store Ukraine's military data on its own hard drives. Social media platforms faced a difficult situation when they became repositories of evidence for war crimes that could be vital for future criminal tribunals. This dilemma was compounded by their own terms of service that prohibit illegal and harmful content. Additionally, Twitter's decision to ban tweets showing images of prisoners of war based on international humanitarian law highlighted the potential for private companies to be considered participants in the conflict. However, there are no clear guidelines for these companies to navigate such dilemmas. It's challenging for them to assess the wider geopolitical implications of their actions and manage competing priorities in the cyber dimensions of the conflict. Companies traditionally assess risks from a financial perspective rather than geopolitical. Of the 200,000 or more hackers which Ukraine employs, many are international, and as soon as they coordinate an attack on a target in Russia, they are directly participating in the war. As such, they also become targets, regardless of where they are physically situated. Cyber attacks, while invaluable for espionage and crime, are far from decisive in armed conflict, especially when applied without coherent goals in mind. Russia's cyber offensive appears to have been just as flaccid as its initial incursion. There are very few instances of tangible damage, which could have forced either opponent into making changes or concessions it would not have otherwise made. Sustained and systemic efforts delivered in a coordinated manner are required to damage an opponent's ability to resist. The fact that the Ukrainian invasion has shown little of this sort of planning is another indicator that Russia's overall offensive was less than meticulously planned, but was rather somewhat spontaneous, aiding the theory that this has all just been a big gamble on Putin's side. But suppose Russian cyber forces were able to sustain the initial high level of significant operations witnessed at the beginning of the war, in that case, they might have achieved strategic outcomes over time. However, Russia experienced a sharp decrease in its ability and quality of exercising cyber attacks. The decline in the use of innovative methods, along with tactical adjustments made by Russian hackers, indicates a limited availability of technical resources available. In other words, the hackers ran out of steam, and most of the useful technical tricks had been spent in the initial failed incursion. This conflict highlights a growing realization about the role of cyber operations in modern warfare. While such operations will always be present, their significance may vary. There appears to be an inverse relationship between the magnitude of a war and the strategic impact of cyber operations. As in, the larger the scale of the war, the less impactful cyber operations are likely to be. Considering this correlation, it becomes less likely that cyberspace should be regarded as a standalone fifth domain of warfare, on par with land, sea, air, and space. And from this point of view, tanks, shells, and manpower are going to be the deciding factors in Ukraine. Cyber warfare seems to be more effective in single, one-off operations, which have the benefit of concealment or surprise. As such, Russia's historical campaigns in the United States and elsewhere with more concrete and tangible goals have managed to be far more successful. In this new era, there needs to be an incorporation of geopolitical risk considerations into corporate governance. The stakes are high, and Elon Musk must think globally and long-term with regards to what horse he's backing and whether or not he wants to become directly involved in the war, which he already has, since by providing an internet connection, he has also improved Ukraine's offensive capabilities. Governments must rethink their interactions with big tech, aligning their actions with principles of the liberal and democratic world. Next, why not watch my video on how freedom for Belarus is tied to Ukraine. And this is my Patreon map. Everyone here supports the show directly, and I'm massively grateful. Thank you all. Cheer Perspective out.